Good evening, guys. Welcome to TCI. I always look forward to Mondays and Thursdays bringing these messages. Today we're coming to you from the beautiful state of Washington. It's gorgeous out here. Today's message is interesting. We're going to be talking about the veil. And I know for those that are not, how do we say this, raised in the church, that word might sound weird. But the word veil is another word for like a curtain, okay? And in the Old Testament, when the Hebrews in the Bible, you go back to the old stories of Moses, and Moses got the Ten Commandments, right? And the Ten Commandments, he walked down, and he puts them in this box that was made, and it's called the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant is where the Hebrews believed God and the power of God was all in this box. So they put the tablets in the box. They had the box all done in a certain way, and you had to carry it by sticks because if you touched the box, you died because of the power of God. The Creator, the Divine, was so powerful it would kill you if you were to touch it. And that's how the Old Testament, God was represented, And flash forward to the New Testament in the Bible, there's a new character comes out. His name was Jesus. And you guys all know the story, right? Jesus was 30 years old. He became the Christ. Up until 30, he was just Jesus. He was just a guy. And then at 30, he became Jesus the Christ, meaning the anointed one. And he had a ministry or a job for 3 years. For 3 years, he traveled that part of the world and tore it up. He changed the world. Now, when he died on the cross, it says that in the book of Matthew 27:51, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom. Now, the word veil is Greek for katapetasma. And I'm slaughtering the Greek word, but I believe it's pronounced katapetasmo. And that word is used for 3 different kinds of curtains inside of the temple. And again, God's always behind the curtain, right? Kind of like the Wizard of Oz. There's a guy behind the curtain. Oh, the great Oz. Well, guess what? When Jesus died, the temple, we talked about the temple veil, was tore in two. It ripped from the top to the bottom. Now, I find it interesting, this topic of the veil, because being raised in the church world, as an example, I like wearing hats. When you walk into a church, I remember I was in a church not too long ago, and a friend of mine calls himself a pastor. He said, hey man, you need to take your hat off. I said, why's that? He goes, you need to show respect to God. This is God's house. And I remember my reply, you're right, it is God's house. And I started pointing at my chest. And he goes, what's that supposed to mean? I was like, this body is God's house. This grass you see behind me, that's God's house. Those trees, that's God's house. So if you want to get real technical, God's house is right here. And I'm going to get technical for a minute. Because the church world, or I should say the religious world, and I don't like the word religion. It's a word I don't appreciate because of what it's done. We have murdered people in the name of religion. And so what's interesting is that when you look at what the church represents, it always represents 4 walls, right? A building, and inside of that building is God. Well, it's a lie. Matter of fact, right now, if God was to pop up in the form of, let's say, Papa Smurf, every single place on earth right now, wherever God's divineness is touching, he pops up as a Smurf, right? Papa Smurf. Well, let me tell you where you're not going to find the little blue purple or little blue man popping up. It's not going to be in that building. It really isn't. You see, unfortunately, my colleagues have spent, and I was one of those, who spent a lifetime as a 4th generational preacher trying to build a building. That's what the building is. It's a building. It's a house of God. That's what we were told. You're building the house of God. But here's the truth. We're so wrong. We are so lost. See, when the Christ died, I believe the reason that veil was torn was the divine himself was saying, I am sick of you humans unbundling this. I don't live in a building. I am not behind a curtain. There is no Oz behind the curtain. It's God saying, the divine, the consciousness of all creation is screaming to stop being put inside of walls. Stop building these buildings for the divine. Because God, as we know God, does want us to build the temple of God. He does want us to build the house of God, which is you and me. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to get rid of the walls and build the house of God, which is you. You are the house of God. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. His name is Nick. Come on over here, Nick. Say hi to TCI's family.
Hi.
Nick doesn't get on the other end of the camera too often. He actually oversees a lot of the IT stuff at the church. This young man had the pleasure today, we had the pleasure, I should say I had the pleasure of walking with him and talking with him and discussing this concept of the veil and the church and the thread in life of creativity that's called the divine. And how sometimes we think God's in this box over here, and God is so far over there, we're not even in the same ballpark. And so it was interesting because I asked you a question. I was like, so what is the divine? What does it mean to you? Tell them what the divine is to you.
It's everything. It's that person on the corner that's homeless, doing drugs.
So that's the house of God?
Yeah.
So you're telling me you think that's where God would be, and not in that nice plush building?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. What a lot of people don't know is we actually do a lot of our filming. Just so you guys know, Nick is in charge of the production. So if you guys don't like it, you can yell at him, by the way. No, but Nick actually, here's the funny thing. One of the things that he does is kind of finds locations to film at. And you know what he actually said to me one day? He goes, you know, the best places to film are churches. And I said, why is that? He goes, they're always empty. Now that's a great message right there. That is like classic. I drove by a dozen churches on the way to this location at another church. And they're all empty, like they are almost all the time. Yet 70 to 80% of our annual budget goes to that building. The holy temple, right? There's no temple. It's a ego. Man, me, you, we have egos. And that ego makes us want to build that building so that when we're dead, someone can say, oh, that was JB built that. Look at that great cathedral. Well, let me tell you, I have had the pleasure of being involved in some of the greatest buildings that America has ever had for churches. The Cathedral of the Holy Spirit in Atlanta, Georgia. Physically, as a child, on my Saturdays, we spent building it. It's no longer part of the church that built it. It went to the wayside and they had to sell it and went to another church. Let's go to the Crystal Cathedral. My grandmother helped build that place from the actual drive-in theater that it was. And unfortunately, when he turned it over to his son, the whole thing fell apart and it got sold to another church. That legacy is gone. In that respect, the building, in other words, the legacy of a building. And I could keep going. Dr. Lee, good friend of the family, great church in Rockwell, Texas, 10,000 members, gone. And I could go right on down the street and keep talking about all this. They're great buildings. They were great, beautiful buildings. But that's all they are. They're buildings. And here's the interesting thing. In 100,000 years from now, the building's not going to be there. But what will be there? The legacy of you. The legacy of me. The legacy of Nick. What legacy are you leaving behind? What temple are you leaving? Because you are the temple. See, at TCI, we're not about a building. We're about the real temple of God, which is you. How is it that we can become better people? That's what this is about. You see, there's lines when you walk down the road or drive down the road. We were just taking a nice 3-mile walk, and there was a white line next to us. Now, that line tells us that that's the end of the road for cars. So we need to stay on this side of the line. But think of God, the Creator, as a line of creativity. Think about that. That you can search for this deity who created all of this for you. And there is this line that he has and she has weaved throughout creation. And this line is this beautiful thing called creativity. And as a human, we're always trying to strive to hopefully be better. Not everybody does. There was a time in my life when I didn't strive to be better. I actually strived to be better, but in a bad way. I was focusing on honing in my bad skills, if you will, and becoming better at that, right? Dad always said, if you're going to do it right. But I was searching for a path. It just was an evil path. Until I finally figured out that I need to search for the right path. And in finding that path, where I found it was not in a building. I searched churches. I was preaching at churches. That's not where God's at. God's in the highways and the byways. He's in the bars. Do you ever notice where Jesus' ministry was? I used to think about that a lot. He always preached at a house. He didn't build some cathedral. He didn't build a cathedral. He preached at friends' houses. That's all he did. He shared on side of hills. And he had people that donated lots of money so that the ministry can continue to do what they did. And the money went to the people. He fed the people. He took care of the people. See, you are the church. And the veil is religion. It's man. We put up a barrier here. And that barrier is about blocking you and God. And you have this veil between you and God. And you're not worthy enough to speak to God. Well, I say BS. I say BS. There was another man who believed the same thought. His name was Martin Luther, about 500 years ago. And he was a Catholic priest. And the guy at the time was a true rebellion. He started a true rebellion. Because up until then, you had to speak to God through a priest. You had to go to a priest to talk to God. So you had to have a man, a veil, between you and God. And he said, why can't me, a human, talk to my creator personally? Imagine that. I know. It seems crazy, right? You're like, whatever. But that actually was heresy. They said that was outright evil. How dare you take the power away from the church? Well, wait a second. When did the church become about a building and not about the people? And you see it all the time. You guys drive by them every day when you drive by a church. It's sitting there empty. All that money. Most property in the U.S., churches, they're only used 2 to 3 times a week. But we put so much resources in taking care of the lawn. We got so many people concerned about the manicure of the building, because if we keep it shiny, the rich people in town will come. And if the rich people come, then we can keep the money and the coffers coming. And see, that's the veil. Again, we're putting these veils up. Well, again, you guys know me in these messages on Mondays and Thursdays. We just like to get some ideas out there so you can think about this as you go through your week. And this week, as we talk about the veil, again, we're talking about a specific veil in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where they created an actual veil to hide God behind. And then in the New Testament, when the Christ died, the veil was torn in two, ripped in half from top to bottom, because the deity, the divine, said hell no to being locked behind a curtain anymore. And that's what TCI is all about. TCI is about saying hell no to the curtain, ripping it down and saying God is you, and you are one with your Creator. And you don't need a priest to hear your confession, and you don't need a building to go to. We were discussing, Nick and me, as we were walking. One of the interesting thoughts that we were discussing was what a preacher once said to me as a boy. I remember he preached at Daddy's church, and he asked this question: why do you bow your heads, close your eyes when you pray to God? That's a great question. And after the church service, he actually made me think, why do I do that? And I asked him, we're all having, dinner afterwards at a restaurant. I said, hey, why'd you ask that question? You really got me thinking about that. And all my family are like, wait a second. The preacher got him interested? I was just a youngster at the time. But yeah, why do I close my eyes? Now, I was taught you reverence God. In the Bible, the word fear God, you hear that a lot in the Old Testament. Fear God, fear God, fear God. The word fear, by the way, just means reverence. So, again, you can see how we've tried to turn it into something horrible. Reverence God just means to reverence. You'll see some people put their hands up like this, bow their head down. It's a sign of humility to God. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when that preacher said that, it changed something in me. I thought to myself, why don't I look up at my Creator? And if you ever watch me, you'll notice when it comes time to pray, I like to have my eyes open. I like to see my Creator around me, in me, through me, with me, walking, talking, hearing. I don't want to miss anything. Because if your father died, your parent, one of your parents died, and you had a chance to see your parent one last time, would you close your eyes and bow your head? Or would you want to take it all in? See, God's exciting. God is awesome. People have made him such a fearmonger. He's horrible. He's a guy that makes all these rules. First off, he's not a guy. We call him guy, or we say God or man. But God is a divine deity, a consciousness that is everywhere instantly, that is all nature, that is all faiths, that is all surpassing, all knowing. It is everywhere. She is in all things. Now, here's the beauty. We, as humans, screw it up all the time by sticking these veils up there. And we hide behind a veil. Now, I'm going to pick on you a little, because this is where we got to try to grow, right? Each week we're trying to get a little better, because you're either getting worse or you're getting better. Scientifically proven, if you go to the gym and work out on your bicep every day, your bicep either gets weaker or stronger. Either gets weaker or stronger, right? I can't stress to you, it does not stay the same. You might think you're physically the same. You might fluctuate the same weight within a pound or two for 20 years, but your actual muscle, the DNA of that muscle, is either getting weaker or stronger every single day. We're the same way. So spiritually this week, I want us to look inside of ourselves. What veils are we putting up to hide between us and God? See, TCI is not going to build a veil to ever put God. What's that movie? Don't Put Baby in a Corner. I think that was a Splash Dance or something. Don't put baby in a corner. Something like that. But don't put God in a corner. Okay, we're not going to do that. TCI, you have my word. 25 years of ministry, this church has never stuck God behind a veil. And nor will we stick God behind a veil. And we're not going to stick him in some building and make this beautiful, glorified place for him to be up on some weird-looking place on a cross or some design. That's not it. You don't know TCI then. So we're not going to put God in the box. But let me ask you a question. Are you putting God in a box? I've done it. I have. I have put God in many boxes before. God can't do this. He just doesn't do it. Okay. Out of the mouths of babes, sometimes the truth comes out. You know, if you don't believe you're ever going to succeed, I'm here to tell you, you will never succeed. So if you have it in your mind that you are never worthy of the Creator, then you're never going to be worthy. I'm sorry to tell you that. This is where one must look within. And this is where you hear me talk about this all the time. Know thyself, know thyself, know thyself. For 25 years, I have been preaching that one thread about knowing thyself. So you got to get into that. And let's see what veils we have put up. What veil is it you're using to block you? Is it the veil between you and your spouse? Is it the veil between you and your children? Is it a veil you're trying to put on in front of people at work? We all do it. We see the church, we put a veil up that God is this thing. And we, humans, decide what that thing is. God is this and this and this. Like we know better than the Creator. But we do the same thing to ourselves. We also say, I'm going to put a veil up. I don't want people to know that I'm hurting inside right now. I don't want anyone to see in this wretched heart. I'm hurt. I'm lonely. I want somebody to hold me and say, I love you. You mean something to me. And I can feel right now that there's somebody out there like that, watching, that's literally saying, I want to be held and told that I'm valued. Well, listen to me right now. There is no veil between you and God right now. God, the divine thread, is coming straight to you. You don't have to go searching for it. That divine thread is right now head on with you. And that divine is saying, my daughter, you are worthy. You are worthy, my son. I love you. I created you. I put all this in motion for you. God is a God of free will. Why is there evil in the world? Because God created this for us, and we are humans, and we're flawed. And some of us make bad choices. Some of us make good choices. Some of us make some evil choices. And with that comes pain and suffering and joy and everything else in between. But I can tell you one thing. If you take the veil down, you can start to see what's going on. See, there is such thing as an image, and we do have to have an image. I get that. You go to work, you want to have an image of success. You're talking to a guy who trained people all over this country on how to become successful. But there's a difference between faking it until you make it and just plain faking it. See, and that's where you've got to figure this out. Because you're watching this right now. This isn't about a crowd watching you watch this. This is about you asking yourself, hey, JB, what veils am I putting up right now? What veil needs to be ripped and torn down so that I can come out of the box? So that I can be all that God created me to be? That's the question I want to get answered for you this week. I want to figure out how we can rip down the veil that man has put up, and that's one thing that TCI is doing. We are shredding the veil so that there is no more God stuck in a box back here in the corner where you can't see him and get to him. That I can assure you, as the founder of this organization, we will continue to push that, to make sure that our organization does not ever stick God in a box. But what about you? It's a two-way street. You need to do something for yourself. You need to help yourself by figuring out what veils you're putting up in your relationships. Do you have a relationship right now that's maybe not going so well? What veils are blocking that relationship? What veil is in between you that you or that person have put up, and maybe you've both put up barriers, to veils, to block each other from seeing it? And this is where, you got to really go, oh my soul, and dig down into this thing. You have to look inside and look within to figure out how you can rip that veil down. And again, when you think of the veil, it's a curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain. Let's rip the curtains down in our life. Let's rip the curtains down in the church world. Let's rip the curtains down in society. Aren't you tired of playing the same old game? I know I am. I know I am so tired of seeing people come and donate all their money to some building that is doing absolutely nothing. It breaks my heart when there's so much need out there. And it starts right there with you. I love you guys. I hope this week, as we venture through our thoughts, as the different messages from our leadership comes out on our Facebooks and on the YouTube channels and stuff, and at our meetings, I hope that everyone is starting to ask the question this week: what veils do I have that I need to tear down? What veil have I built up that blocks God from me? What veil have I blocked my spouse from me? What veil have I blocked my friend from me? Think about that. Because once you can figure out that you got a veil up, well, now we can work on tearing the veil and ripping it down. So, as we go out this week, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how we can continue to, as an organization, TCI, rip the veil down. Because we are one heck of a veil-ripping organization. But let's find out how we can rip your veil, the one you've put up, the barriers that you've put in between, so that we can become better people. I love you guys. God loves you. You know the drill. Live positive.